I am a 28-year-old man with a twin brother, Jason. Growing up, Jason and I experienced vastly different treatment from our parents. For some reason, my parents were convinced that Jason was destined for greatness, while I was labeled the so-called black sheep, just because I was more interested in playing sports and making friends rather than obsessing over academics. They constantly compared us, which was demoralizing and crushed my self-esteem from a young age. As a child, I had to watch my brother have extravagant birthday parties with his friends while I was treated like an afterthought. He often had sleepovers while I was never even allowed to bring friends over. To be honest, I loathed every minute of my childhood. The only person in the family who seemed to care about me was my grandmother. Whenever she visited, she would bring me my favorite chocolates and occasionally slip a few dollars into my hand so I could treat myself later. As the years passed, the blatant favoritism toward my twin brother gradually transformed into emotional abuse directed at me. My parents would openly mock my grades and belittle my hobbies. No matter how hard I tried, I could never meet their unrealistic expectations of being the perfect child. Although I excelled in sports, they barred me from participating in extracurricular activities because they wanted me to focus solely on academics, just like Jason. It was frustrating, and I felt utterly helpless as a child. Later, during my sophomore year of high school, I got grounded yet again, this time for the crime of having a Snapchat on my phone. I had done absolutely nothing wrong. Like most teenagers, I had downloaded the app to stay connected with my friends. However, according to my parents, this was a massive betrayal and a breach of their trust since they had forbidden me from communicating with my friends outside of school. They went absolutely ballistic. They threw my stuff around the room, took my bedroom door off its hinges, and told me that as long as I lived under their roof, I would have no privacy. Instead of supporting me, my twin brother made my life even worse. The toxic environment created by my parents' unfair treatment gave him an opportunity to exploit the situation to his advantage. He developed a habit of lying about me, falsely accusing me of things I never did so he could get away with everything. If he stole something, he would effortlessly shift the blame onto me. My parents, already inclined to believe the worst about me, accepted his lies without question. He would demean me in front of my friends at school and mock my appearance. Despite this, I had a wide circle of friends because I was approachable and open to making connections. Jason, on the other hand, struggled socially. He started to resent the fact that I could easily talk to people while he, as an introvert, felt awkward. This jealousy reached a boiling point on our 15th birthday. None of his friends showed up to celebrate with him. I never found out why, but in stark contrast, my friends took me out for ice cream, and I had an overall wonderful day. Jason was furious. To get revenge, he started spreading false rumors about me at school, painting me as a spoiled brat. He went even further, telling people that I was physically abusing him at home, knowing that our parents favored him. Unbeknownst to me, he took things to a disturbing level. He would punch himself, intentionally giving himself black eyes or bruises on his shoulders. The next day, he would confidently walk into school displaying his self-inflicted injuries as proof of my supposed violence, backing up his lies with dramatic, fabricated stories. Whenever our parents questioned him about his injuries, he would lie, claiming they happened during innocent activities like playing football with his friends. The rumors and his so-called evidence started gaining traction. Before long, whispers spread throughout the school. Even my friends began looking at me with suspicion. At first, I noticed subtle changes. Friends who once greeted me enthusiastically in the hallways started acting distant. Invitations to group hangouts became fewer and farther between. It was like a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, people hesitated to associate with the supposedly spoiled girl accused of violence. One day, I finally worked up the courage to ask my former best friend why things had changed between us. She hesitated for a moment before revealing the truth. Jason had been spreading lies about me to everyone. She detailed the horrible things he had been saying, accusing me of things I had never done. I was shocked to hear her words. The feeling was a mix of disbelief and betrayal, as if the ground beneath me had given way. My own brother, someone I had grown up with, was spreading lies about me, accusing me of things I would never even dream of doing. It was a betrayal that cut deep, leaving a knot in my stomach and a heavy heart. The day after school, I confronted Jason, but he chose to ignore me. I begged him to stop lying about me, but he just smirked and told me, "You deserve to rot alone." I was at a loss for words. His lies and behavior were starting to scare me. I wanted to talk to my parents, but deep down, I knew they would believe him over me. The isolation stung, especially because I had always been open to making friends. It felt like Jason's jealousy-fueled lies were tearing down the connections I had spent years building. Even my teachers started to catch wind of the rumors. It was surreal, like I was living in a parallel reality where my true self was overshadowed by the malicious story spun by my own twin. The lies had grown beyond mere teenage gossip. They were now shaping how people actually perceived me. Then, my worst nightmare came true. The rumors quickly reached the principal's office. One day, I was called in, along with Jason and our parents, to discuss the allegations. I sat there, my heart pounding, as the principal demanded the truth. I hoped Jason would finally come clean, but instead, he doubled down on the lies. He looked the principal in the eye and said, "Yeah, it's true." He painted me as a violent bully who tormented him whenever our parents weren't around. I couldn't believe it. Shock washed over me as Jason spun an entire twisted story about how I was angry at him for getting more love from our parents. It was all a bunch of lies, but he stuck to his story like glue. My mom burst into tears, holding on to Jason like he was some kind of victimized hero. My dad tried to comfort him, telling him that he was brave for speaking up and that he would make sure nothing like this ever happened to him again. I tried to defend myself. I pleaded with the principal, begging him to see the truth. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of accusations, desperately trying to swim to the surface. But Jason kept at it, insisting that I was this angry, violent person who took out my frustrations on him every day. My mom kept crying as she clung to Jason, throwing me accusing looks. It was like fighting against a wall of blind belief in my brother's made-up story. Then the principal reprimanded me. He told me that the school had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and that my actions were grounds for suspension. I begged him not to suspend me. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to tell him that Jason was lying, but he shook his head. "I can't just let this slide," he said firmly. I sobbed, pleading with him to reconsider, but his mind was made up. The verdict, a 10-day suspension. "Others need to see this as an example of why bullying won't be tolerated," he said. It hit me like a truck. My stomach dropped. I started crying even harder, practically begging him to believe me. But it was useless. My parents, embarrassed by the situation, dragged me out of the office. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to plead my case, to make them understand. But they wouldn't listen. As soon as we got home, things took a drastic turn. Out of nowhere, my dad started packing up my stuff. I froze, confused. What was happening? Even my mom seemed caught off guard. She asked him what he was doing, but he just shouted, "I can't let her live in the same house as Jason anymore." I was in shock. I fell to my knees, sobbing, begging Jason to tell the truth, but he just stood there, cold and unmoved. My dad kept packing. When he finished, he threw my suitcase into the foyer. I clung to his legs, crying, pleading with him not to throw me out. But his expression was stone cold. "A bully like you doesn't deserve to live in this house," he said. Then he told me that if anyone wanted to take me in, it would have to be my grandmother. Otherwise, I was on my own. It felt like the world was crumbling beneath me. I stood there surrounded by my belongings, kicked out of my own home. Eventually, my grandmother arrived. She didn't ask questions. She just gathered my things, helped me pack them into her car, and guided me into the passenger seat. Before getting in, she walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. When my dad opened the door, she let him have it. She yelled at him, furious that he could treat his own daughter this way. With stern determination, she warned him, "If you ever try to contact her again, I won't hesitate to call the police or CPS. What you've done to your own child could land you in jail." My mother, attempting to deflect blame, told my grandmother that everything was my fault. However, my grandmother wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground, defending me, emphasizing that I was just a child who didn't deserve to be treated so heartlessly. That was the first time in my life that I realized just how powerful my grandmother was. She didn't cower before my parents, and unlike them, she trusted me. Eventually, we drove away, leaving behind the only home I had ever known. I can't even begin to put into words how indescribable the pain was during that time. I remember crying on my bed, refusing to eat despite my grandmother's gentle urgings. When I finally told her everything Jason had done, she was shocked. But most importantly, she believed me. That meant everything. Having even one person in my corner made all the difference. When my 10-day suspension ended, the thought of returning to school felt like stepping back into a lion's den. As I walked through the familiar hallways, I could feel the stares, the judgment, the whispers, the sideways glances from classmates who had already made up their minds about me. The weight of my brother's false accusations still lingered. Meanwhile, Jason blatantly ignored me, acting like I didn't exist. He had become friends with a small group of people who believed his lies and saw him as the victim of my supposed attacks. No matter how much I tried to tell my side of the story, it fell on deaf ears. I was an outcast, branded with an unjust label that followed me everywhere. In the classroom, in the cafeteria, in the hallways. The eyes that met mine were filled with disdain and mistrust. I became a loner. I kept my head down, went to class, ate lunch alone, and went straight home after school. I had no friends, and it felt like no one wanted me there. My parents never once called to check on me, not even a text. But my grandmother constantly reminded me that none of this was my fault. She reassured me that life would get better, and somehow I held on to that hope. Despite everything, I graduated high school with good grades and looked forward to college, where I hoped to finally start fresh. And, for the first time in my life, I experienced what freedom felt like. No one was watching over my shoulder. No one was comparing my grades. No one was competing with me. I met people. I formed friendships. Despite the emotional and physical scars left by my family and peers, I decided to put it all behind me and enjoy my college experience as much as I could. During this time, I discovered my knack for content writing. I had always dreamed of becoming a writer, but I wasn't sure if it could be a sustainable career. So, I had given up on the idea. But to earn some side income, I decided to start freelancing. I signed up on various freelancing platforms and started landing jobs from big-name clients. Slowly, I built a portfolio. Throughout college, I maintained this side hustle and never once asked my parents for a single penny. By the time I graduated, I had a big decision to make. Instead of getting a corporate job, I realized I could pursue content writing full-time. Thanks to the long-term professional relationships I had built, I had multiple clients bringing me in on their projects. This wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a career. Having a legitimate freelancing business didn't just make me financially independent. It also gave me the freedom to travel the world as a digital nomad. Traveling helped me heal from my past. It wasn't easy, but I saved every dollar I could and took a chance on myself. Over the years, I've seen so much of the world, and yet there's still so much left to explore. The only person I considered family throughout all of this was my grandmother, and I adored her. She was sad when I moved out, but she understood that I needed to be independent. Despite my hectic schedule, I always made it a point to be there for her. Every weekend, I'd visit her and we'd share meals together. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch, talking for hours. Other times, I'd help with household chores or take her to the park for a leisurely walk. I made sure she never felt alone. Recently, I completed one of the most important projects of my career. I can't mention the brand, but I was lucky enough to work with them, writing blogs and product descriptions for their company. After the project wrapped up, I asked the team I worked with to leave me positive reviews on my website. They were more than happy to do so. Excited, I took screenshots of the reviews and posted them on my Instagram. This was a huge deal. As expected, many fellow content writers reached out to congratulate me. Some even reposted my story to help spread the word. And that's when something unexpected happened. Strangers started messaging me, asking for help with their websites. My relatives noticed my growing success, and some of them reached out to congratulate me. Eventually, I was contacted by my college principal. He had seen my work and reached out, inviting me to return to the college for a seminar to talk to students about building a career in content writing. I was nervous. Public speaking wasn't exactly my strong suit, but I decided to take a chance and agreed. When I found myself standing before eager faces, sharing my experiences and insights, I felt like my life had come full circle. During my speech, I talked about the struggles I faced and how I worked hard to sustain myself, even through the darkest days. It was a fulfilling experience to empower others and contribute to the growth of the writers' community. Some clips from my speech started going viral on Facebook groups as people resonated with my journey. For the first time, it felt good to finally be recognized for my hard work. Last week, I was invited to speak on a local news channel. The segment was about the benefits of content writing, and they wanted me to share my journey and insights with their viewers. I was nervous but excited about the opportunity. During the show, I talked about my experiences, the importance of client reviews, and how a simple appreciation post could open doors to incredible opportunities. Reaching a broader audience and inspiring more individuals in the field was both humbling and exhilarating. When the interview finally aired, I shared clips on my Instagram, proud of the moment. That's when my relatives and cousins found out how well I was doing. You see, because my parents never talked about me, no one in my family had any idea that I was working with popular brands and getting invited to TV shows. Word spread quickly within my family. And I guess the TV interview must have finally reached my parents' ears too. Because just a few days later, while working on another project, I checked my phone after keeping it on silent all day. To my surprise, there were 6 missed calls from my mom. I was shocked to see her name on my phone. It had been years since she last called me. After all that silence, I couldn't fathom why she was reaching out now. Hesitatingly, I called her back. She picked up immediately. Then I heard my dad's voice in the background. He was there too. I answered their questions without much thought, until they started asking about how much I was earning these days. That's when my mom suddenly changed her tone. She started talking about how hard life was for them these days.